Hello, everybody. Here he is, the wonderful Dr. Arjun Pai, who I haven't spoken to in probably about, God, has it been like almost a year? Time goes by so
Maybe,
quickly. I don't
yes.
I don't think it's been that long. I think it's probably been about 6 months, but sometimes 6 months can feel like a year. And Dr. Pai is here today. We're going to have a discussion on Saturn, fittingly enough, because here we are talking about time and how something seems like it's been a long time, which is one of those things that's in the realm of Saturn, creating delays, time itself. So we're going to approach this as a discussion, both of us talking about some concepts about Saturn, but I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Pai first and see what he has to share with us. I'll put him on the spot and a Saturnian
Thank
way.
you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Michael. Although we have, for the audiences, maybe we have not been interacting for over 6 months, but I think we've been interacting almost every week, over
Exactly.
social media. We've
Most
been
definitely.
exchanging. So um, I think that way we have been connected for
I
the last
agree.
6 months.
Yes.
And we said, let's do something. And I remember Michael invited me to do this video on the Saturn. He said, "You've been working very hard, my friend. I think we should be doing something on Saturn." All of us really, maxed up at this time, on things that we've been doing. We're multitasking on so many things, all of us.
Goodness. Yes.
So, although, when I think about Saturn, I've been thinking. I've been doing a course as well on Saturn. On Navagrahas and Nakshatras and all of this. It's very fascinating to really know about, to understand about Saturn and Shani. You know. So the first thing that which comes to my mind is the mantra, the mantra for Shani. He's born from the shadow of his mother.
Hmm.
Nilanjana Samabhashyam Raviputra Yamagrajam Chaya Marthanda Sambhotam Tam Namami Shanishwara. That's the mantra for Shani. He's born from they say, Nilanjana Samabhashyam. They're trying to compare it with the Blue Mountain. Raviputram, which
Hmm.
means he's born from Ravi, which is Surya, sun
Surya.
god.
Yes.
He's the son of this, the sun god. Yamagrajam, they say he is the Agrajam, which means he is the elder brother of Yama. Okay. Chaya Putra, which means he is born from his mother, who was a shadow. She was a
Yes.
shadow which is left behind. And we pray to that form of Shani. Is, he and Shani can always, what we say about Shani is one of the things that I always thought about Shani, and this is a very candid interview that we're doing, and I've
Hmm.
never prepared for this. I told this before we started, and I want to really learn about your perspective as well, Michael. And this is going to be a very interactive session. I was always wondering about the Saturnian rings.
Hmm.
Is this something which, the rings are trying to constrict Saturn? Is that trying to show you some forms of restraint, some sort of delays, some sort of pessimism? You're bound.
Or
That's
is
very
it or
important.
is it a crown?
Oh, it could be a crown as well. Yes,
Yeah. Exactly.
it's an interpretation.
Yeah.
It could be a crown. And surprisingly, a couple of weeks ago, a student of mine sent me an article, a very recent study, which says scientists have really found a magnetic link, a magnetic thread between the sun and Saturn.
Huh.
It's very strange. As though it's like the father and the son. There's a link, and there's a magnetic thread, there's a magnetic influence that they have seen between the Saturn and the sun. And Shani is supposed to be born in the month of Pushya, which is, you know, Pushya is the nakshatra, Paushya Masa.
Right.
And he was born, he was supposed to be born, and this is as per the Puranas, he was born on a waning moon, on an Ashtami, and when the star was Swati Nakshatra on the Lagna. Okay, this is what it said, and but there are other Puranas where they say moon was in Revati Nakshatra when he was born.
I've heard that side of it too.
Yeah. So there's some things also say about Paushya Mas, which is the lunar month of
Right.
Pushya, on a waning moon Ashtami and born in the star of Swati. But people also have seen the other side of the story as saying that he was born on Revati Nakshatra as well.
I think it's interesting because there's a lot of symbolism in both of those things. With the Swati symbolism, with the determination of Swati, which is a very positive Saturnian trait. That's one of the more positive Saturnian traits, along with Pusha. The concept of sacrifice. I'm doing this. I'm making a sacrifice. I'm accepting these limitations because I recognize that it's beneficial for something else, which is how Pusha is able to create spiritual energy. That's why Pusha is often spoken about as being such a beneficial nakshatra, because it understands the concept of sacrifice. And with Revati, the concept of Saturn being born during Revati, it's the whole thing of duration and time. So all of those make
Absolutely.
perfect sense.
That's very beautiful. What you're saying, Michael. And even thinking about Swati Nakshatra, it's all about Swati is about Vayu, and
Yes.
it's called as Pradvamsha Shakti, is to scatter.
Mm-hmm. To scatter like the
And
wind.
this, yes, scatter like the wind. And many people who go through very intense periods of Shani, they are almost scattered in their thoughts. Their mind is very scattered. They're not able to focus and bring their thoughts together. Because what is Shani? Shani is, when you see the sun represents the centralized power of authority.
Mm,
And Shani kind of represents power of authority by distributing the power amongst the masses.
mm. And
It's
it's
distributed authority.
And it's interesting too because when you think of Saturn being born of the sun and you think of having such a powerful father, how are you, and Saturn's spoken of as being a planet that looks down all the time, right? So you've got such a brilliant father, you're going to be going, how am I going to live up to that? So there's that side of it too. But please continue. I didn't mean to interrupt
No, this is
and
beautiful.
disrupt your
Whatever you're
thought.
saying. No, no, no. I think this is very important. That's why I said this is not an interview. This is discussion, and that's why, I really appreciate whatever you're saying, because that's how I think the viewers will be able to really connect with what Shani is all about. And Shani actually gets a blessing from Lord Vishnu. Okay, he says you'll always step with measurement, and restraint will be your primary attribute. This was the blessing from Lord Vishnu for Shani. Because after Yama attained the status of being a Lokapala, Surya, his father, was very proud of him and announced that his success will be in all the three worlds. But it was Shani who really had to go, and Shani was very upset with his father for boasting Yama. And Yama's insensitivity towards his lack of achievements, what led Shani to go. And because of his jealousness, and he was very insulted, he vowed to get the fame. So Shani went out to pray to Lord Shiva, and he prayed for many years to receive the boons from not only from Shiva but also from Brahma and also from Vishnu. All the three murtis he prayed to. And because of his slow movement that you see and his measured steps that he has taken, he always had a very hard time in trying to come to terms. And so very after many trials that he had to go through, okay, wreaking havoc in his life by Indra, because Indra was, when Indra feels that somebody is doing intense penance, he's always threatened.
Mm.
Indra is what? Your senses, Indriyas.
Yes.
So when somebody is trying to do some intense penance, Indra feels always threatened that his throne is at risk.
Right.
And Shani is one of the, one of those people who made intense penances to all the three murtis, and he gained blessings, and he calls Shiva as his main mentor, although he worships Vishnu in the form of Shri Krishna. It is believed in some texts they say Shani worships Vishnu. So there is some sort of restrained behavior that comes. And also you see Shani, although we say is connected to longevity because he is the Karaka for the sixth and the eighth houses. I feel that there's something he is also trying to defy death because of his. He's not very compatible with his brother Yama
Mm.
because of the disrespect that Yama had for his mother, his own mother, Chaya.
Right.
Because he was, Yama felt he was getting a stepmotherly treatment from Chaya because his real mother was Samjana. So I have a feeling that Shani can never be the Karaka for death. He is the Karaka for longevity. He can give you immense longevity. He'll delay things, but he'll never deny things. Do you have any thoughts on that, Michael? I've always feel that he is a Karaka for longevity, but he will delay, but he is never going to deny you of anything that you deserve to get because he's a Karma Karaka.
Well, on that, I think you said it in the last bit, and let me elaborate. Um, Saturn is speaking from a different perspective, and thank you for sharing what you did just then with that, because that gives a whole other insight into it. Where Saturn is associated with in our chart, it's where we're focused on surviving on an individualistic manner, much along the lines of how you were saying there was the disrespect between Shani and Yama. There was the competition that was there on a certain level. There's the similar concept of ego with the Atman or the soul, right? There's the whole thing of being born of shadow, so to speak, right? Being placed here. You have your father as being the sun, being the brilliant one, right? You have the soul. And here you are, you're kind of cast here and you're having to survive, and you're having to survive through the ego. And because you are here as a part of shadow, you see the darkness. Now, I'm not saying Saturn sees only the darkness, but that's all that can be focused on is the task that's at hand. And so Saturn becomes very determined in relation to what Saturn rules. Let's say Saturn is your Putra Karaka. Children become a very big focus of your life. Let's say Saturn happens to rule the ninth and the 10th houses, your spirituality, your philosophy of life, how you apply that towards your karma. Those are going to be your big focuses of life. Unless Saturn happens to be in his own domain, unless he happens to be in Capricorn, or unless he happens to be in Aquarius, everything else that he casts his glance on is going to begin to wither. And it's not that Saturn is killing off those things. So on a certain level, you're right. He's not creating the death of those things. He has to bring his focus onto one thing. Because he's disciplined, Saturn often gets a lot of criticism as being very narrow and, equally being very restricted. His gaze is very narrow, but sometimes a narrow gaze is very needed on a certain level. If we're going to focus, if we're going to have one pointed concentration, we need a narrow focus on a certain level. So Saturn's focus is very, intensive on what he has to deal with. Similarly, when you consider the whole concept of planetary friendship and enmity, Saturn has so many enemies that Saturn has to deal with. So many things that Saturn is vying for position with. So he's got to really work extra hard on what he's there to take care of. Saturn's a life giver on a lot of levels. Without Saturn being present in your life or being present in your chart, nothing is going to come into form. That creativity of Venus or that creativity of Jupiter, that is a force. If you don't have that Saturn there somewhere in your chart, it's very difficult for that force to become a form. Saturn is the great crystallizer. He does things through time. He's patient with the processes. Yeah. But, you were saying something along the lines of Saturn probably, were you saying that you don't think Saturn likes to be slow in that regard? I think I would agree on a certain level, because I think that Saturn is having to compare himself to everything and everybody else. And because Saturn is a downward looking planet, sometimes Saturn feels bad about his position. But he's also the elder. And so that's a very important thing. Being the elder, he's wise, he's knowing. But being the elder, you also have a lot of responsibility. And sometimes that responsibility can feel very crushing and overbearing. And just as we've been talking, between ourselves about going, there's really a lot on my plate. There's only so much I can handle. That's how Saturn becomes, is I've got to focus on this. And when you're focusing on that, all those other things, there's only so much you can handle. You have to become very focused on that. So I agree. Saturn's the planet of longevity, but I think that Saturn's longevity is applied to those things that Saturn is needing to preserve. And I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but I wanted to add something in association with Rahu on that, and how it's always spoken of as Rahu behaving like Saturn, right? And the whole concept of, Ketu's like Mars, Rahu is like Saturn. Well, if you understand that on a certain level, Saturn represents the servant, right? And that's a very important function, the servant. The servant gets discredited as being like this lowlife or this cretin or something that's undesirable all the time. But, without that servant, without that service that's there, nothing happens. Nothing happens at all. But, kind of drawing in the whole concept of Ketu and Rahu. Ketu and Rahu being related to as the army of the royal court of planets. Well, what is Mars? Mars is like the general, right? Mars is the general. So Ketu is the part of the army that's got to protect its own territory. So a general is going to be able to plan much more efficiently when he's within the boundaries of his own kingdom. When that general is out on the battlefield, it's a little more difficult because things are being thrown at you right and left, and you don't have the capacity to make those split-second decisions as efficiently as you might like to, because you're being placed in unfamiliar circumstances. Things aren't going as planned. But the servants, which can be considered like the army, the men in the army themselves, they're the ones who get placed in the sub-zero temperatures. They're the ones who have to forage for food. They're the ones that always have to focus on surviving. And so the servant aspect of Saturn, it's a very necessary thing, because let's face it, life can be challenging sometimes. And so you have to be able to stay grounded. You have to be able to try to be stable and disciplined in order to deal with the circumstances that are there. And it's that side of Saturn which brings the longevity to things. I think Saturn is more prone, not necessarily to creating death. I think Saturn is more prone, upon occasion, to creating illness. But what is illness anyway? Illness is a notification that there's something that's wrong in the first place. That's why Saturn is a Tamasic planet. In relation to death itself, I have always found that the one planet that tends to be more associated with death, and I hope that people don't automatically start freaking out about their Venus dasha or anything like that, because it doesn't mean that. You have to take a lot of things into consideration, is Venus. I have seen Venus be present in so many death circumstances with individuals. So I agree with you. I don't think Saturn is the harbinger of death. I think Saturn is the harbinger of focus, determination, dealing with the problem that's there. But the problem is Saturn's focus in dealing with those problems becomes very restricted and very narrow, because it has to be. It has to deal with the task that's at hand. So I think, one of the best things for people, I constantly hear people going at length about their sati periods and being completely frightened by it, or their Saturn return and being completely frightened by it. When you're going through either of those periods, embrace Saturn, because Saturn is giving you a tremendous gift. It's just you may not be familiar or as open to the gift that Saturn wants to give you, because it's difficult. But if you're willing to go slow, because Saturn will make you go slow at certain times, right? You can have a Saturn transit, and if it's a difficult Saturn transit, you can be in a position where all of a sudden you feel like things need to go. And it's interesting because you were talking on this very point. You feel like things need to go very quickly, but they can't.
They can't.
No matter how much you might want them to, they have to slow down, and you have to kind of take it step by step in a very methodical manner, which is Saturn's approach. It has to be done step by step. But often that doesn't fit in with our modern paced, quick moving world. And so then we think, Saturn is giving me a hard time. Well, no, Saturn's not giving you a hard time. I think maybe Saturn's teaching you to slow down. And slowing down, some other problems might be created, but you'll learn a lot at the same time. Anyway, I kind of went off on a tangent, but what are your thoughts on that?
No, but I think it's brilliant. Whatever you said, Michael, is very, very profound. And this is the same thing that I wanted to share about Saturn. One of the things about Saturn that many people associated Saturn with the number, numerologically, it associated with number 8. And number 8 is nothing but it's largely, it's like an Ouroboros. It's, life after
Right.
death,
Yes,
it's like
exactly.
the Ouroboros, which
good
goes.
point. Yeah.
But if you look at the yantra of Saturn, and when you take the root number of Saturn, Saturn is connected to number 7. And this is very, very hard for people to believe, because when I was doing this, and you look at the Shani yantra, and you take the lowest number in the yantra, which is like the root number of that yantra, or that's when you realize that Saturn is somehow connected to even bringing balance in your life.
Yes.
It's very hard for people to believe that Saturn, what you talk about, we talk about delay, we talk about bringing structure, organizing. But if you really think about it, Saturn gets exalted in Libra, in Swati Nakshatra. And that's where you find the most independence. Swati is the place where you feel more independent. And what is very surprising, Michael, and this is what I was discussing this morning with a student of mine. And he mentioned that when I was teaching him what nakshatras, he said, "Sir, can you tell me, how are all these nakshatras supposed to be so very benevolent? You talk about Pushya, it's about nourishment and nurturing, and you see Brahaspati there, who's a deity. Go to Swati, it's Vayu, and it's all about independence. Okay, then you go to Uttara Bhadrapada, it's again ruled by Ahir Budniya, but it's all about, the animal symbol which is associated with that is the female cow.
Cow. Yes.
Then sorry, I think I made a mistake. It's not Swati. I was talking about Anuradha.
Yeah, I figured you probably meant that.
Yeah.
I intuited
So,
that, but it's good that you
yeah,
clarified because I don't know if
yeah.
everybody else. Yeah,
So Anuradha. So
yes,
Anuradha, I'm talking about Vimshotri Dasha. So
yeah,
we're
yeah,
specifically talking about Vimshotri because we have to make this very specific because different dasha systems have different
yeah.
planetary rulers. When we're
Most
talking about
definitely.
Vimshotri, yeah. So I'm talking about Pushya, Anuradha, and Uttara Bhadrapada. When you talk about these three, you see, um, Anuradha is connected to Mitra.
Hmm.
The deity is Mitra, which is friendship, which
Yes.
is being cordial. And the animal there is either a deer, and some of them also take that as a rabbit.
Hmm.
I've seen both things. Some people say it's a deer, the female. I mean, the animal associated with it is a deer or
Yeah.
it's a rabbit. You go to Uttara Bhadrapada, which is another Saturn ruled nakshatra. You see, it is a female cow. So, and then you go to Pushya, it's a goat. So all of these are very docile animals, you know. And you see the beauty of all these three nakshatras whenever planets fall there, and they are all connected. Number eight, remember that again, because Pushya is the eighth nakshatra. If you start with the Ashwini as being the first nakshatra, you come to Anuradha, it's a 17th nakshatra. 1 plus 7
Is
is again 8. You go to Uttara Bhadrapada, is the
26.
20, 26th nakshatra. Again, in the 27 nakshatra scheme, I'm talking about, it's a 26th nakshatra. Then you see again, it's number 8. So when you say it's karma karaka, it's almost like number 8 showing you, it's like infinity, the symbol of
Yeah.
infinity, which is, standing straight. There's some things which are coming back to your life.
Yes, because it's a circle, and it's always
It's
up and down, and
up and
yes,
down, exactly.
interchange. Yes.
And Rahu, they always say, is in higher octave, as you mentioned just now. They say, Rahu very much behaves like Shani or
Yes.
Saturn. They say, Shanivat Rahu, Kujavat Ketu. That's the usual thing. I mean,
Yes.
what they
Yes.
say is, Kuja means, you know, s- Ketu is very similar to Mars, and Rahu is very similar to Saturn. And it's just, Rahu is just in higher octave or a higher harmonic of Shani. So many of the things that you see, if you're talking about servants, this is another thing always seen with people, or containers, or carrier bags that I've seen. Something that contains even the doormat that you see outside your house. That's again Shani, or your footwear. So, and this is something which A.V. Sundaram actually told me is the first. Shani always gives you the first indication that you are on the wrong path. No
Mm.
other planet has given an indication. You know, Shani is the first planet to give an indication, and usually he says the indication comes in form of pain in the leg. Either
Mm.
you're stressed out. It could be a genuine thing because you're working very hard. That's a different
Yeah.
situation. But
Yeah.
I'm saying, in a normal condition, if you start getting pain below your knees, that's an indication of Shani. And he says it's sometimes Shani is like the speed breaker. He just gives you an indication because Shani is a karaka for the legs. And one of the astrologers who actually told me when you're going through, Saturn Mahadasha, Antardasha, or Sadesati, the best remedy is to walk. Walk because you're exercising your Shani.
That makes sense. Yes.
Because when you walk, you actually are, uh, you know, uh, you're you're helping Shani to say that I'm working very hard, even though maybe you're not working very hard. But by walking, you're giving an impression that I'm really, trying really hard to make some changes in. And the first indication, the first speed breaker, Professor A.V. Sundaram says it's the legs. Either you have a fall, you hurt your legs between your knees and your ankles. That's shani. That
I
means
can
somewhere there's something you're going on a wrong path.
I can definitely confirm that from pretty much
Really,
every time I have had an intensive Saturn period. There is something leg wise, foot wise, stiffness in the joints,
stiffness in the
bones.
joints. Exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
So Shani is saying, please exercise. You're right to move around. You
And
can't
be
be stable.
flexible. And be
Be
flexible.
flexible.
Yes.
Yes. And that's why the beauty of Shani is to say, bring more structure in your life, bring more flexibility in your life, be
Yes.
more adaptable, have a lot of patience, have a lot of perseverance, take a step back sometimes to review what you're going through. Don't rush into things that you have to. I think these are the most important teachings.
Do you think that's why Saturn transiting the moon, close proximity to the moon, can be so difficult? Because the moon is very fluid and very adaptable. And it's also the way we react to things through our senses, through our manas, through our sensory mind. And so when Saturn's transiting that, then quite often there can be the reaction to the circumstances, which makes us become very um, dogmatic in our approach to something because we are wanting to respond to something in the manner that we're most used to adapting to the situation in. But Saturn is stepping into the equation and going, no, you have to be more flexible. You actually have to be more fluid. I'm going to make it more difficult for you to be fluid in order to teach you that you need to be fluid. But you need to be fluid in a different manner. You need to adapt in a different manner. You need to be flexible in a different manner than you're most accustomed to reacting. And maybe one of the ways that people have to be more flexible and fluid at those times relates to acceptance
Beautiful,
and
beautiful.
sacrifice on a certain level, because Saturn is also
Absolutely.
that which is sacred. And I think that there's a very big lesson in terms of Saturn being the child of the sun. Because Saturn, even though he's given such dark qualities, is sacrificing for the sun. And he's serving the sun, right?
Absolutely.
They get seen as bitter enemies, but they're bitter enemies to the individual who won't relent on a certain level. And so that's the perception of the native or the individual with those Saturn transits going through their chart. It's not necessarily that Saturn and the sun are bitter enemies. It's from our perspective, they're bitter enemies. On the higher level, they're actually very good friends because Saturn is sacrificing for the sun. It's just that Saturn is bringing to our attention the parts of us that are so separate from our soul, that are so divorced from that particular reality, which is why one of the things I've noticed is during Rahu dashas or Rahu antardashas, prachantardasha, whatever, that Saturn, whatever it rules in your chart, is where you're trying to survive. It's what you're trying to cling onto with every last grasp that you can. When in reality, you may not need to be holding on to that quite as strongly.
I think that's very, very profound what you're saying, Michael. I think I completely agree with you. And another thing that I want to draw, the viewers' attention is how our ancients have actually seen Saturn as. Saturn is connected to Kurma avatar and the Dasha avatar scheme of things. Vishnu's 10 incarnations.
Mm-hmm.
Amongst 10 incarnations, is connected to the tortoise avatar.
Yes.
Tortoise is a very slow moving thing. But let us just remember the whole incident where Kurma avatar came, when he had to balance or take
Mm.
support, being the foundation of the mountain of Mandara, so
Yes.
that the churning of the ocean could happen, the ocean of milk, where the gods and the demons were churning to get the Amrit. or to get the nectar of immortality. He became the base, he became the foundation, the avatar of Vishnu, which is
Mm.
Kurma avatar, which is the
Hmm.
tortoise. So I have a very firm belief that Saturn is the foundation. You need to really have a
Oh,
very
most
strong
definitely.
foundation,
Mm.
and he really helps you build. And the churning of the life is happening on his back, like the
Hmm.
tortoise. And you know how the tortoise is a very slow moving animal. It's like, but whenever it feels threatened, it goes into a shell. And that's what happens with a lot of people who go through the the major periods, or the minor periods of Saturn. They go into a shell,
Yes.
whether it's Sadisati, whether it's the major periods of Shani. They kind of draw themselves inside. But he becomes the foundation for the entire cosmos,
Mm.
Saturn. And that's the most important thing that we need to understand about understanding Saturn, because he brings structure, he brings foundation, okay, he brings stability,
Mm.
and he brings longevity, longevity to all the people.
I remember when I went through my first Saturn return because when that happened, um, obviously Saturn went over my natal Saturn, back retrograde over it, back over it, right? But I have a lot of planets that are clustered in the next Rashi, just the other side of where Saturn is. I'm not giving my secrets away. So all those people who want to know where things are in my chart. Um, and so it went over all of those planets too. It went forward over them, then back over them again. I had basically a Saturn return that felt like a good 5 or 6 years, really. Because even though it wasn't Saturn over natal Saturn, it was Saturn over that cluster of planets. So during that time, I like made really good friends with Saturn.
Wow.
And that was one of the things that I learned about Saturn during that time is, Saturn really is your friend, but you have to kind of just surrender to the process. Saturn will serve you. You just have to kind of go, you know what? I'm just responding to all of this wrong. And during that time, too, I was a recluse. I was a complete recluse. So what you're saying is true. Saturn makes you go inside of your shell during Saturn's transits, but you're going inside of your shell so that you can, so you can be stronger, so you can support more, so you can get more done. There was, tremendous amount of growth in my life during that period of time, and that's what Saturn brings to us. And that's why I think it was a good story you were bringing into the equation about all the nakshatras connected with Saturn tend to have a nourishing quality to it. And I think that that's the side of Saturn that gets forgotten. Everybody loves to hate Saturn. Just as everybody I find loves to hate retrograde planets, it's because we want things to be a certain way, and things can't always be that way. And the more we, kind of come to terms with the concept of things can't always be the way we want them to be, but they're going to be in a way that's beneficial to us, then, I think that's when all those difficult planets, Saturn, Rahu, all those difficult, harsh planets really begin to become beneficial to us.
And also, I think this is very interesting that we're discussing about Shani. And even if you look at the symbol of Shani, you can see a cross over an arc below.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, if you really watch it very closely, he would look. It would look more like an elephant's goad. You know what is the elephant's goad?
Mm-hmm.
In Sanskrit, we call it as an ankush. Ankush or an elephant's goad is nothing but an instrument. It's a sharp instrument.
Yeah.
Whenever the elephant, goes berserk, the mahut or the rider who's sitting on the elephant, he pierces it through the ear so that he can guide the elephant and get it under control. The symbology of Saturn that you see, it's like an elephant's code.
Mm.
or which we call in Sanskrit as Ankush. Ankush means something which can, subdue you. Okay, something that
Mm.
can put you.
Hmm.
Just 1 second only. Sorry, it's a phone call. So an ankush or an elephant's coat is how you can really control the elephant from
Yes.
going berserk.
Yeah.
And it's very if you can see, that's what Saturn does on us. Is trying to control, not control, but trying to put us on the right path.
Exactly. And while you're mentioning that too, another way I had heard that same symbol explained was by the late Bepin Bahari, who wrote a really wonderful book. I always recommend this book to everybody, not even just for nakshatras, but especially for nakshatras, called Myths and Symbols of Vedic Astrology. Has wonderful symbolism related to the nakshatras, but also the planets, which is when you have that arc. That arc is aspiring upwards. And then you have the cross, which is the sacrifice that we have to, that we make. The I hate to get too traditional in association with it, but it's like the crucifixion of the soul, so
Yes,
to speak.
yes,
Not the soul, but the individual, the ego. Yeah. For the sake of the soul. So the individual is aspiring towards the soul, but they have to go through the sacrifice. It's what you have to let go of and what you have to get rid of in order to become more like that. It's what Shani has to get rid of in order to become more like his father, so to speak.
yes.
Yeah.
To be the chief,
Yes.
and that's why you see, Michael, that Shani is always connected to the middle finger.
Mm. That's
Although in
funny. I was
certain,
just thinking that a moment ago. And I'll tell you why I was thinking that. Because I went to do my glasses and I went like this and I went, oh, I better not use that finger because people might think I'm doing something else. But continue.
yeah,
And so then I thought
but
about Saturn being connected to that. So it's interesting that
yes,
you say that.
absolutely,
Yes.
because
Yeah.
in many cultures, the display of the middle finger is derogatory.
Yes.
That's
Mm.
showing supremacy,
Yes.
and the middle finger is also connected to the nakshatra Jeshta, which means I am the eldest.
Mm.
I don't care what you have to think about it. That's
Yes.
the Jeshta. So the middle finger is always connected to the Saturn, and this mudra is again connected to Saturn.
And
Where you touch
also,
your,
also pranayama technique.
yes, pranayama,
Yes. Middle
exactly,
finger is often used.
middle finger.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So you can see all these connections with the Shani coming in, and even when you look at symbology, Saturn is connected to the bow. See, if you look at some of the symbologies in the certain part of India, it's very fascinating. You see, Saturn is connected with the bow, Mercury is connected with the arrow.
Mm.
Okay, so it's like Saturn and Mercury are need to be together if they have to really target something. So any combinations of Saturn and Mercury together is supposed to be a very good combination for achieving your objectives as well. Because
Mhm.
like the bow and the arrow, you have both of them, you can target. This is, I'm talking about symbology. I'm not talking about.
Oh, no, I know, but you just brought up an interesting concept because if you think about the nakshatras, yes, a mercurial nakshatra always follows a Saturn nakshatra.
Beautiful.
Jyeshta, which follows Anuradha, right, is the first of those. And if you think about the fact that it's always a mercurial nakshatra that relates to a Gandanta point.
Wow. Yes, very true.
There's a lot of symbolism there, and I often tell people when people ask me about how to deal with difficult Gandanta periods, I always tell them you need to bring Mercury into your life, strengthen your
Yes.
Mercury somehow, because it's about how you are objectively seeing the situation. But if you're not relating to Saturn well, you're not going to relate to Mercury well, because Saturn is what feeds Mercury that sense of discrimination and that sense of discernment. And that's why you have those Saturnian nakshatras always preceding the Mercurial nakshatras.
That's very profound that you're saying, and I think that's whenever you see even the yantra of Saturn, right? I know we have uh, how how much longer do we have? I think we're almost done,
Maybe,
isn't it?
yeah, about another 5 minutes. Is that okay?
5 minutes. Okay, yeah, 5 minutes. Yeah.
I hate
So
to,
Sat,
speaking of time, I hate to restrict
I
time.
know, but we need to because
Yeah.
when you look at the Saturn yantra, we can do another session as well.
Oh,
Because there's
definitely.
so much.
Yeah.
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 But I'm saying when you look at the Saturn yantra, whether you go diagonally, whether you go, mm, whichever way you go in the yantra, it
Hmm.
adds up to 33, the number 33. Okay, and
Hmm.
totally when you look at it, it adds up to 99, the yantra.
Hmm.
So typically, I would say people, even if you look at this is the beauty of the whole system is you have 9 planets, you have
Hmm.
12 houses, and you have 12 rashis. If you add them all together, it's 33.
Yes.
You have 33 gods in Rig Veda. So there is some sort of correlation with this and with Shani Yantra. 33. 33 is a
And
number.
these things are not a coincidence, by the way.
It's not a coincidence.
Just so people know, yes, these things are
Yes.
structured that way on
Yeah.
purpose. Yeah.
And any sadhana that you want to do to Shani, they will bear fruits in 33 days,
Hmm.
33 weeks, or you can say 33 years as well if you want. But I would say 33 days, 33 hours, 33 days, 33 weeks, 33 months.
Hmm.
These would be very profound if you see in people's life. People can test it. People can give the feedback. 33 days is Saturn sadhana.
Mm.
If you want to do a sadhana for Saturn, 33 days is definitely. And Shani Mudra is this. This is Shani Mudra. When
Hmm.
you touch your middle finger with the tip of your thumb, and that improves your focus, your patience, your understanding and discipline. It gets you the support with all the tasks that you do. It brings stability and strength in your life. Shani Mudra is one of the best mudras that you can follow in the hand mudras. So when you think your life is completely going haywire, you don't have any focus, you don't have sit with this mudra, and that's when you start getting stability, focusing back in your life. Anyway, I think Michael, we've almost come to the end of this discussion. I know we could discuss this for
Yeah,
a
let's
longer period, but
let's set something else up again sometime soon. But I've really
sure,
enjoyed having you here today talking about Saturn and the way we handled the conversation too. Back and forth with it. And so let's do something else like that together sometime soon. Doctor
exactly. We'll
Doctor
do
Pai,
that.
before you go, do you want to tell me what's big in your scene lately? In other words, your realm of the universe. What you got going
Yeah,
on?
I've been doing a lot of things recently, Michael. I've been working on my app as well,
Hmm.
and on Cosmic Insights. We're hoping to bring in more and more features onto the app. We want more people to. It's a free app to begin with. If you want just the basic features, if you really want to upgrade, there's a paid version. But I think with the basic version, you can really get to see the power of that app.
I've
You
seen
can
it.
really
It's really
see.
wonderful. Yes, it's very
So
connected.
I think I need to send you even a free version, of the app that I can send it across to you, um, a subscription for a year.
Oh, I would love that.
Because
Thank you.
yeah,
Yeah,
I'll get that into your email.
definitely.
Anyway, I want you to experience the app and see and give us inputs on feedback on the certain things we really need to improve on. We might want to add more features into the
Hmm.
app. We want to use more iron amshas that people can really be able to experiment with. But it's a handy thing that I've been doing with. I think that is what I've been doing in the last 4 months. I've spent lot of hours that I've been working with on this, and I think this whole session that we're doing on Shani is just the discussions that we've been having about our lives, individual lives, and
Exactly.
and I think that's how this whole discussion came about. I think you know,
Most
Shani
definitely.
is Shani is really teaching all of us a great lesson, and I'm really, really grateful to Shani.
Oh,
You
you
know,
have to be.
although he gives me, pain in my back, lower back, pain in my legs, but I still say, this is your grace. Please, please bless me. I really am honored by all that you have done. Because without Shani's grace, I don't think anything would have been possible.
No, exactly. Shani is the great crystallizer. Crystallizes
Yes.
all things.
And I would call him the benevolent king amongst, people would say the sun is, I would say, Shani and Ketu
Hmm.
would be the most important planets, the revetic planets in your chart, which you
Hmm.
cannot completely dismiss. I think every planet is very important, no doubt about it. Every planet has its own role to play in every chart that you look at. But when I see Shani is, people are going through Shani periods, I really want to go and look at the layers of where the Shani is operating from and what level he is operating from.
Hmm.
And I think that is something that I would like to learn from you. Just before we went into this, I know there is a new system that you're going to teach in the spring next year, and I would like to be a student of that
Oh,
system. Which,
Shayanati Avastas. They're really
yes,
wonderful. Yes. They tell you so
I think
much. Yes.
so. I would like to learn from you. This new system that you're saying about China, the Avastas. I really want to learn about seeing the strength of the planets, and you want to briefly tell to your viewers, what is China, the Avastas, so that people understand.
Well, Shayanati Avasta, I actually did a video on it recently, but it was a brief video, and I didn't want to go into the calculations because there are a few different ways it can be calculated. And I don't even think that there's a lot of software that's including it these days. Basically, it's in chapter 45 of Brihat Parashara or Hora Shastra, but basically, it lets the individual know how they're approaching a planet. And it's different as per dasha. So you might be approaching the sun in one way during one dasha period and in a completely different way. In a, like, so say you're in your moon, Vimshotri Mahadasha, you might be approaching the sun one way, right? And then you go into Mars, you might be relating to your sun in a completely different way, which makes a complete load of sense in connection with that. And it's determined by a few different factors. I'm just going to give the components, not the calculation, but it's determined by the Janma Nakshatra. And it's also determined by the rashis that the planets are in. And if you uh, are able to relate the first letter of your first name to the Sanskrit alphabet, then it adds a completely different layer to it. So it's different as per individual based upon the first letter of the first name. So it's a very profound system. And as it involves nakshatras in the calculation and equally rashis in the calculation, it's an excellent bridge between the nakshatras and the rashis, which is a really wonderful reason to explore it because it gives you that connection between those two concepts.
I think, Michael, I look forward to learning the
Oh,
system
I
from
would
you.
love to share it with you.
Yeah,
We'll talk about that. Yeah, I would love to
sure,
connect with you and figure out a way to do that.
definitely, definitely.
Okay, excellent.
Okay,
Thank you for being here today, Dr. Pai.
thank you very much.
All right, bye now.